Welcome, dear detectives, to Cozy Crimes and Cocoa. I'm Alistair Gray, your guide through the golden age of murder. Tonight, we ride the Orient Express into 1926, where a blood-red sunrise paints a locked-room mystery no one can solve, except one small Belgian with perfect moustaches. Pour your tea, dim the lights, and let the little grey cells do the rest. Chapter 1. The Golden Carriage. The Simplon Orient Express cut through the night like a silver needle threading the dark cloth of Europe, its wheels singing a low metallic lullaby over the rails. Dawn was still an hour away when the train slipped out of the Paris suburbs and began its long climb into the Alps. The air growing thinner, colder, sharper with every mile. Inside the first-class dining car, the chandeliers had been dimmed to a honeyed glow, their crystal pendants trembling with the rhythm of the carriage. The tables were set for breakfast, though no one had yet ordered. White linen, heavy silver, bone china cups waiting to be filled. A faint scent of beeswax and coffee lingered, mingling with the crisp bite of mountain air that leaked through the seals of the windows. 6 passengers occupied the central table, arranged with the unconscious geometry of people who have known one another too long and not nearly well enough. At the head sat Sir Reginald Ashford, 63, broad-shouldered still, though the years had begun to settle in the folds of his neck and the silvering of his moustache. He wore a charcoal morning coat, the breast pocket squared with a crimson pocket handkerchief, and his fingers drummed a silent tattoo on the damask cloth as he scanned the financial pages of Le Figaro. To his immediate left was Lady Beatrice Ashford, 31, golden-haired, fragile as Sèvres porcelain, her laughter too quick and her eyes too often fixed on the middle distance. She toyed with a string of pearls the size of pigeons' eggs, twisting them until the skin at her throat whitened. Across from her sat Captain Marcus Hale, late of the Royal Fusiliers, his left leg stretched stiffly beneath the table, the result of a shell splinter at Passchendaele. He had the kind of face that photographs well. Strong jaw, pale scar along the cheekbone, but in the flesh it carried the permanent pallor of a man who had seen too much and slept too little. His dress uniform had been replaced by a well-cut tweed suit, though the military bearing remained. He sat as though expecting a parade. Beside him, Miss Evelyn Croft, Sir Reginald's private secretary, typed invisible memoranda on the tablecloth with ink-stained fingers. She was 28, plain in the way that efficient women sometimes allow themselves to be, hair pinned tight, spectacles reflecting the chandelier light like twin moons. At the far end of the table, Madame Valentina Rossi held court with the effortless authority of a woman who had sung Violetta to packed houses from Milan to Buenos Aires. She was 42, though no program would dare print the number. And this morning she wore a robe of violet silk that pooled around her like spilled wine. A half-empty flute of champagne stood at her elbow. It was her habit to toast the dawn wherever she found it. Finally, Mr. Felix Lang, art dealer, slight, quick, eyes darting like a stoat's, nursed a glass of orange juice and tried to look as though he belonged among the others. His suit was Italian, his tie too loud, and his smile never quite reached the corners of his mouth. Between them all, one chair remained empty, its napkin folded into a perfect bishop's mitre, waiting for a guest who would never arrive. Outside, the mountains rose in black silhouette, their peaks already touched with the first pale promise of light. Inside, conversation moved in fits and starts, the way it does when everyone is pretending not to listen to everyone else. Sir Reginald folded his newspaper with a snap that made Lady Beatrice flinch. "Beatrice, my dear, you are twisting those pearls into knots. They cost more than the annual wage of everyone in this carriage combined." His voice carried the clipped authority of a man used to giving orders on dockyards and in boardrooms. Lady Beatrice released the necklace at once, her fingers fluttering to her lap. "I'm sorry, Reggie. I didn't sleep. The train rocks so." Captain Hale leaned forward, his voice gentle. "The motion is soothing, Lady Ashford, like a cradle, though I confess I prefer the sound of a howitzer at dawn to this infernal whistling of the wheels." Madame Rossi gave a throaty laugh that filled the car like smoke. "Mon capitaine, you are too grim. Dawn is for lovers and champagne, not artillery." She raised her glass in salute, and the crystal caught the light, scattering tiny rainbows across the tablecloth. Miss Croft allowed herself the ghost of a smile, then returned to tracing columns of invisible figures. Mr. Lang cleared his throat. "Speaking of dawn, Sir Reginald, I have secured an appointment in Istanbul with a collector who is mad for your Rembrandt sketch. He will pay £20,000 without blinking." Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. "The sketch is not for sale, Lang. I have told you this." Lang's smile faltered, then recovered. Of course, merely passing on the interest." Beneath the table, Captain Hale's hand tightened around his coffee cup until the porcelain creaked. He owed Sir Reginald £50,000, a debt run up at the tables in Cairo and Cannes, and every reminder of money felt like a noose tightening. The train slowed, the brakes exhaling a long, steamy sigh. Through the windows, a small signal box appeared, its red lamp glowing like a demon's eye in the half-light. The conductor, Monsieur Bouc, a compact man with a moustache like a well-groomed hedgehog, entered the dining car and announced in careful French that there would be a delay of 20 minutes, while a freight train passed on the single track ahead. He bowed, apologized for the inconvenience, and withdrew. Sir Reginald pushed back his chair. "I shall take a turn in the observation car. The air will clear my head." He patted his wife's hand with the absent affection of a man stroking a pet. "Order me coddled eggs when the kitchen opens, Beatrice." Lady Beatrice nodded, her smile brittle. Sir Reginald strode down the length of the dining car, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet, and disappeared through the connecting door. The observation car was directly above them, reached by a narrow spiral staircase at the rear of the dining car. It was a glass-domed bubble of a room, added only 2 years earlier for the pleasure of passengers who wished to watch the Alps roll by in daylight. At this hour, it would be empty, cold, the perfect place for a man to smoke a cigar and consider his empire. The remaining passengers settled into the small silences that follow a departure. Madame Rossi signalled for more champagne. Miss Croft produced a small leather-bound notebook and began jotting figures. Captain Hale stared out at the mountains, his reflection superimposed on the darkness like a ghost. Mr. Lang drummed his fingers. Lady Beatrice twisted her napkin into a rope. Minutes passed, measured by the ticking of the ormolu clock above the service door. At 6:42 a.m., the first true light of dawn touched the highest peaks, turning the snow rose-pink. The dining car's glass dome, directly beneath the observation platform, caught the glow and scattered it across the table in soft prisms. At 6:45, the sun crested fully, a perfect disk of molten copper, and the dome blazed like a jewel. At 6:47, Lady Beatrice looked up. Her scream shattered the quiet like a dropped crystal goblet. High above them, visible through the transparent dome, Sir Reginald Ashford stood at the railing of the observation car. For one frozen heartbeat, he seemed merely to be admiring the sunrise, one hand raised to shield his eyes. Then his knees buckled. He folded forward, his chest striking the railing, and a dark stain flowered across his white waistcoat, crimson against starched linen. He slid down the glass wall of the observation car, leaving a smear of blood that caught the sunrise and turned it the colour of fresh slaughter. His body came to rest slumped against the lower pane, one arm dangling, fingers brushing the brass rail. Directly above the dining table, in the centre of the dome, a single neat hole had appeared in the glass, no larger than a sixpence, its edges starred but not shattered. A thin trickle of blood ran down the inside of the dome and dripped, plink, plink, onto the damask tablecloth below. Captain Hale was on his feet first, his chair clattering backward. Good God! He started for the spiral staircase, limping heavily. Miss Croft stood frozen, her notebook sliding from her lap. Madame Rossi crossed herself, the champagne forgotten. Mr. Lang's face had gone the colour of old parchment. Lady Beatrice remained seated, her scream echoing in her throat long after the sound had died, her eyes fixed on the blood dripping onto her husband's untouched place-setting. Monsieur Bouc burst in from the service corridor, his face blanching as he followed their gaze upward. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "the observation car! It is locked. The only key." He pointed to a brass hook beside the staircase. A single Yale key hung there, swaying gently with the motion of the train. No one had left the dining car since Sir Reginald's departure. No one could have. The connecting door to the rest of the train was in full view of the table, and the spiral staircase led only upward to the sealed observation platform. The train was still halted at the signal box, the doors locked against the cold. Outside, the sunrise continued its slow climb, indifferent to the horror it illuminated. From the shadows of the connecting corridor stepped a small, immaculate man in a dove-grey suit, his potent leather shoes gleaming, his moustache waxed to symmetrical perfection. Hercule Poirot had been travelling incognito in compartment 7, bound for Istanbul on a matter of discreet diplomacy. He surveyed the scene with bright green eyes that missed nothing: the blood, the hole, the key, the frozen tableau of suspects. He adjusted his tie, smoothed his moustache, and spoke in a voice like warm cognac. "Mesdames et messieurs, it seems we have a problem most insoluble. A man is shot in a locked room above our heads. The bullet falls from the sky like the judgment of Zeus, and yet no one has left this table. The little grey cells, they are intrigued." He smiled, a small cat-like smile. Chapter 2. The Body in the Sky. Poirot mounted the spiral staircase with the measured tread of a man ascending the steps of a cathedral, his gloved hand gliding along the polished brass rail as though testing its honesty. The staircase curved tightly, the treads narrow, the air growing colder with every step, until his breath misted in the dim glow of a single wall lamp. At the top, a heavy door of oak and steel confronted him, its Yale lock gleaming with fresh oil. The key still hung downstairs, yet the door was shut fast. Poirot pressed his eye to the small porthole set at head height. Sir Reginald Ashford lay on his back in the centre of the observation platform, legs tangled in the folds of his morning coat, one arm flung wide as though reaching for the sunrise that now blazed full through the glass dome. The blood had spread in a dark lake across the teak floorboards, its edges already thickening in the chill. A single bullet hole pierced the exact centre of his waistcoat. the fabric around it scorched black where the heat of entry had singed at the threads. Poirot's gaze travelled upward. The dome itself, triple-layered armoured glass, installed at vast expense to protect passengers from falling rocks in the mountain passes, showed one perfect, perforation no wider than a gentleman's little finger. The hole was cauterized at the rim, the glass melted rather than cracked, and through it the sky burned a merciless gold. No weapon lay beside the body. No footprints marred the thin skim of overnight frost that had settled on the external balcony. The observation car was a sealed steel egg suspended above the dining car. Its only access the door at Poirot's shoulder and the narrow balcony that ran around the exterior, accessible only by climbing the outside of the train while it thundered at 40 miles an hour through the Alps. Impossible. Poirot produced a slim leather case from his breast pocket, selected a pick no longer than a matchstick, and within 3 heartbeats the lock clicked open. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with the care of a priest shutting the tabernacle. The air smelled of cigar smoke, blood, and the faint metallic tang of high altitude. He knelt beside the body, his knees creaking softly, and examined the wound without touching it. Entry front center, exit none. The bullet was still inside. He sniffed, no cordite. He measured the angle with a pocket rule, perfectly vertical, as though the shot had been fired from directly above the dome. He noted the position of the cigar, still clamped between Sir Reginald's teeth, the ash unbroken, meaning death had been instantaneous. The dead man's pocket watch had stopped at 6:47 precisely, its crystal cracked by the impact of his fall. Poirot slipped the watch into an evidence envelope, then stood and surveyed the room. The balcony door was bolted from the inside, the bolt thick with undisturbed dust. The ventilation grille, 12 inches square, set high in the wall that separated observation from dining car, was screwed shut, the screws bright and unmarked. On the floor beneath the dome lay a single brass screw, smaller than a shirt button, its thread coated with a sticky red-brown residue that was not blood. Poirot pocketed it with a murmur of satisfaction. Downstairs, the dining car had become a tableau of barely contained panic. Monsieur Bouc had drawn the curtains across the dome, but the blood continued to drip. Slow, deliberate plinks onto the tablecloth that made Lady Beatrice whimper with every impact. Captain Hale had retrieved a first aid kit and was attempting to organize a stretment, though the patient was 10 feet out of reach. Miss Croft stood rigid, her spectacles fogged, notebook clutched to her chest like a shield. Madame Rossi had drained her champagne and was refilling the glass with trembling fingers. Mr. Lang paced in tight circles, muttering about delays and appointments. Poirot descended the staircase as though floating, his expression serene. "Mes amis," he announced, "the local gendarmerie will not arrive for 3 hours. The train is stopped, the doors sealed, the telegraph line down. We are, as the English say, in the soup. But Hercule Poirot is here, and the soup will be clarified." He gestured to the table. "Please resume your seats. No one leaves this carriage." He began with the timeline, speaking softly, forcing them to lean in. Sir Reginald had left the table at 6:27 a.m., confirmed by the clock and by Miss Croft's shorthand note of a dictation he had given her moments before. The sun had crested at 6:45. The scream sounded at 6:47. 20 minutes, no more. During that interval, every person at the table claimed to have been in sight of at least 2 others. Captain Hale had been speaking with Madame Rossi about opera. Miss Croft had been correcting proofs with Mr. Lang. Lady Beatrice had been alone for precisely 90 seconds, while she visited the ladies' powder room at the rear of the carriage, visible through the open door the entire time. Poirot's eyes lingered on her damp gloves, the left one darker at the fingertips, smelling faintly of yeast and champagne. He made a note in his little green book. Next, the motives, unspoken until Poirot spoke them. Lady Beatrice would be penniless in a divorce. Sir Reginald had consulted solicitors in Paris only yesterday. Captain Hale's IOUs totalled £50,000 due next month. Miss Croft had been caught transferring funds to an account in Zurich. Sir Reginald had threatened Scotland Yard. Madame Rossie's career-ending affair with a married duke had been bought silent with Ashford shipping shares. Mr. Lang's Rembrandt sketch was a forgery worth precisely the paper it was drawn on. Each motive was delivered with the precision of a scalpel, and each suspect reacted differently. Beatrice flushed crimson. Hale's jaw clenched. Croft's spectacles slid down her nose. Rosie laughed too loudly. Lang went very still. Poirot watched them all, the little grey cells ticking like the train's wheels. He examined the key on its hook. Brass, heavy, no duplicates issued. The staircase had been in view the entire time. No one had climbed it. The connecting door to the rest of the train had remained open, but the corridor beyond was empty. Monsieur Bouc had been polishing glasses at the bar, visible to all. Poirot crouched beneath the dome, running his fingers along the underside of the table. Nothing. Then he noticed the faint circular mark on the tablecloth directly beneath the bullet hole, as though something hot had rested there moments before the shot. He scraped the residue with a fingernail. Frozen champagne, already melting. His moustache twitched. Upstairs, the bullet had entered from above. Down here, something had been aimed upward. The impossible crime had two halves, and the lower half was in this room. Captain Hale cleared his throat. My service revolver is missing from my compartment. Webley, 38. I noticed it last night. A murmur rippled around the table. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting, mon capitaine. But the wound is 22 caliber. Your weapon is innocent, though perhaps not its owner. He turned to, Monsieur Bouc. Seal the carriage. No one touches anything. Hercule Poirot will now conduct the first of many conversations. Outside, the sunrise climbed higher, gilding the blood on the dome until it looked like molten rubies. The body in the sky waited, patient as death, for the little Belgian to unravel the miracle of its falling. Chapter 3. The Mechanism of Miracles. Poirot stood alone in the galley. The door closed, the clatter of the dining car muffled to a distant murmur. The space was narrow, all polished copper and white enamel. The air thick with the ghosts of coffee and bacon. A crate of champagne. Dom Perignon 1915 12 bottles sat on the counter, its lid pried open. One bottle was missing. Poirot lifted another, tilted it to the light. The cork was intact, but the foil cap had been peeled back and replaced with a strip of gold leaf, the sort used by art restorers. He sniffed, yeast, sugar, and something sharper. He set the bottle down and turned his attention to the ice bucket beside it. The ice had melted into a cloudy slurry, but at the bottom lay a perfect sphere of frozen champagne, no larger than a golf ball. And at its centre, suspended like an insect in amber, a .22 bullet. Poirot's breath caught, a small, satisfied sound. He fished the sphere out with tongs, wrapped it in a napkin, and slipped it into his pocket. The little grey cells were singing. He returned to the dining car, carrying a small tray, a kettle, a length of copper wire, a child's catapult confiscated from a sleeping boy in second class, and a music box no larger than a pocket watch, its lid painted with a faded ballerina. The suspects watched in silence as he set the items on the table like a conjurer preparing his act. "Observe," he said, and filled a champagne flute with water from the kettle. He dropped the frozen bullet into the glass. It bobbed, then sank, the ice already beginning to melt. The bullet is lead, the ice is water. Together they weigh almost nothing. Fired upward at the correct velocity, the ice melts in flight, the lid continues its trajectory, and the evidence vanishes. He wound the music box. It began to play a tinny rendition of Clair de Lune. With a flick of the wrist, he attached the catapult to the music box's winding key, using the copper wire. When the melody reached its final note, the key turned, the catapult snapped, and a pebble Poirot had substituted shot upward, striking the underside of the dome with a sharp ping before falling back into his waiting palm. The angle was perfect, the timing exact. The room was silent. Captain Hale broke it. But the observation car was locked. How did the device get inside? Poirot smiled, the smile of a man who has found the missing piece of a jigsaw. He led them to the ventilation grill that connected the two cars, a square of brass set high in the wall. The screws were loose, one missing entirely. He reached up and slid the grill aside. The shaft was narrow, 12 inches by 12, but large enough for a bottle, a music box, a child's toy. The killer did not enter the observation car, Poirot said. The murder entered from below. He produced the brass screw he had found upstairs. This held the music box in place. When the sun rose, the light melted a wax seal. Here you see the residue, and the mechanism began. The catapult fired at 6:47 precisely. The ice bullet travelled upward through the ventilation shaft, melted in the warm air of the observation car, and the lead fell straight down into Sir Reginald's heart. He paused, letting the words settle. But the device was placed the night before. Someone in this carriage had access to the galley, to the champagne, to the child's toys. Someone who knew the train would stop at the signal box, giving them 20 minutes of stillness to align the shot. He turned to Miss Croft. "Mademoiselle, you were in the galley at midnight, cataloguing Sir Reginald's correspondence. You signed for the champagne delivery." Miss Croft's face went white. I was only checking the manifest." Poirot nodded. "And you, Madame Rossi, you requested the crate be opened early. You have a fondness for sunrise toasts." Madame Rossi's fingers tightened around her glass. "I was asleep." Poirot's eyes moved to Mr. Lang. "And you, monsieur, you carry gold leaf in your valise for your restorations." The foil on the bottle was not from the winery. Lang opened his mouth, closed it again. Poirot continued. The music box was wound at 6:45. The sun did the rest. The wax seal was calibrated to melt at the exact moment the train stopped. The killer did not need to be in the observation car. They needed only to be beneath it. He demonstrated again, this time with the real ice bullet. He placed it in a makeshift catapult rigged to the music box, aimed it at the ventilation shaft. The melody played. The catapult snapped. The ice bullet shot upward, struck the grill, and shattered. The lead core pinged off the metal and fell to the table, rolling to a stop beside Lady Beatrice's plate. She stared at it as though it were a scorpion. Poirot picked it up with tweezers. "Calibre 22. The same as the wound. The ice is gone. The evidence, poof." He turned to Monsieur Bouc. "Search the luggage. Find the second music box. Find the gold leaf. Find the child's catapult. The killer is among us, and the mechanism of miracles has betrayed them." Outside, the Alps gleamed in the morning light, indifferent to the small drama unfolding in the gilded cage of the Orient Express. The body in the sky had been explained. the hand that set the miracle in motion had not. Chapter 4. The Alibi of Sunlight. Poirot arranged the suspects in a semicircle beneath the blood-speckled dome, the repaired pane of cardboard now taped over the bullet hole like a crude bandage. Sunlight streamed through the remaining glass, striping the table in bars of gold and shadow. He placed the recovered music box, its twin to the one in the ventilation shaft, at the center. The ballerina lid sprung open to reveal a dab of strawberry jam gumming the mechanism. "The scent of burnt sugar," he said, tapping the jam with a pencil. "Not from the galley, but from a secretary's desk. Mademoiselle Croft, you clean your typewriter keys with jam to loosen the ink. A charming economy." Miss Croft's lips thinned. "It is efficient." Poirot inclined his head. "And incriminating. This box was found in your typewriter case, wrapped in carbon paper." He produced a second item, a child's periscope mirror on a bamboo stick, its glass smudged with fingerprints. This was taped beneath the table, aligned with the ventilation grill. The killer watched the device arm itself, ensured the catapult would fire at the precise moment the sun melted the wax. He slid the mirror across the tablecloth. It stopped in front of Mr. Lang. "You collect curios, monsieur. This is from your travelling case of optical novelties." Lang's fingers twitched. "A toy. I sell them to tourists." Poirot's smile was gentle. "And you sell forgeries to millionaires. Sir Reginald was meeting an expert in Istanbul who would have exposed your Rembrandt sketch as a daub by a Parisian art student. £20,000 vanished." Lang swallowed. "I rigged the device, yes, but only to frighten him. The bullet was wax, harmless." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Wax does not penetrate triple-armoured glass. Someone swapped your bullet for lead." He turned to the champagne crate, now on the table. 11 bottles remained. The 12th lay in pieces in the galley sink, its foil cap replaced with gold leaf. "Madame Rossi, you toasted the dawn at 6:25. You passed the crate. Your opera gloves, silk, sound dampening, were used to muffle the music box's chime as you exchanged the wax for lead." Madame Rossi's laugh was brittle. "I was singing to myself. Ask Captain Hale." Hale nodded slowly. "She was, but she left the table for 30 seconds to fetch sheet music from her compartment." Poirot produced the gloves from an evidence bag. The left fingertip was torn, a thread caught in the music box's winding key. He reconstructed the timeline on a napkin, sketching with quick, precise strokes. 6:25. Rossi swaps bullet during toast, gloves hiding prints. 6:28. Lang crawls beneath tablecloth, long enough to conceal him, adjusts periscope, slides music box into grill. 6:30. Lady Beatrice visits powder room, dampens gloves with champagne to clean a spill, or to wash blood. 6:45. Sun melts wax seal. 6:47. Catapult fires. 6:48. Sir Reginald locks door from inside. Habit. Collapses. The key never left the hook. The door was irrelevant. Poirot tapped the napkin. The sunrise was the trigger, the tablecloth the stage, the ventilation shaft the barrel. He looked at each suspect in turn. Lady Beatrice's gloves were still damp. Champagne or melted ice. Captain Hale's revolver, found in Madame Rossi's hat box, was .38 caliber. Wrong gun, planted to mislead. Miss Croft's jam was on the music box, but her fingerprints were not on the catapult. Lang admitted the device, but not the bullet. Rossi admitted the toast, but not the swap. Someone was lying. Someone was half lying. Someone was lying by omission. Poirot knelt again beneath the table, running his fingers along the underside. There, taped to a leg, was a second mirror, smaller, angled downward. The killer watched Sir Reginald enter the observation car. Ensured he stood in the exact spot. He peeled it free. The tape was fresh, the mirror warm from the sun. This was placed after the first mirror, a refinement, the work of two minds. He stood brushing dust from his knees. Monsieur Lang built the scare. Madame Rossi turned it lethal. But there is a third hand. The ice bullet was perfect, too perfect. The wax seal calibrated to the minute. Someone knew the train's schedule, the signal box delay, the angle of the sun at 6:45 on this latitude. He turned to Monsieur Bouc. The conductor's log. Who requested the stop? Bouc paled. An anonymous telegram from Paris. Engine trouble ahead. Poirot's moustache twitched. Sent by someone who knew Sir Reginald's itinerary, someone on this train. The sunlight shifted, the bars of gold moving across the table like prison bars. The alibi of sunlight had cracked. The killer, or killers, were still in the light. Chapter 5. Complications and Twists. Poirot stood motionless in the centre of the dining car, sunlight pooling around his shoes like liquid gold, the repaired cardboard patch on the dome casting a faint shadow across his face. The air had grown thick with the scent of fear and champagne gone flat. He held the second mirror between thumb and forefinger, turning it slowly so the light fractured into shards across the suspects' faces. 2 mirrors, he said softly. One to watch the mechanism arm itself. One to watch the victim take his place. A duet of observation. But duets require 2 players, and this orchestra has a hidden conductor. He laid the mirror beside the music box. The torn opera glove, the gold leaf foil, the brass screw, each item arranged like a card in a game of patience. Monsieur Lang admits the device. Madame Rossi admits the toast. Yet the telegram that stopped the train was sent from Paris at 4:17 a.m., before any of you boarded. Someone planned this murder weeks ago. Someone who knew Sir Reginald's every movement, his habit of smoking in the observation car at dawn, the exact minute the sun would crest the eastern ridge. He turned to Lady Beatrice. Madame, you booked the tickets. You insisted on the Alpine routing. You knew the signal box delay was scheduled. Lady Beatrice's pearls clicked as she swallowed. Reggie loved the sunrise. I only wanted to please him. Her voice cracked on the last word. Poirot's gaze softened, but only for a moment. And you, Captain Hale, you limped to the galley at 3 a.m. to fetch brandy for your nerves. The steward saw you. You passed the champagne crate. Hale's scar whitened. I couldn't sleep the leg. Poirot nodded. And Miss Croft, your shorthand notes include a memo dated 3 weeks ago. Confirm sunrise angle, 46.7 degrees, 6:45 a.m., 12 October. You typed it for Sir Reginald, but you kept a carbon. Miss Croft's spectacles flashed. It was for the new yacht's chronometer. Poirot's smile was thin. Or for a murder. He moved to the ventilation grill, slid it open, and reached inside. His hand emerged holding a third object. A child's tin telescope, its lens cracked, a scrap of violet silk caught in the focus ring. Madame Rossi's scarf. You dropped this when you climbed the luggage rack to align the catapult. Your perfume, jasmine and despair, clings to the metal. Madame Rossi's eyes blazed. I was retrieving my music. The rack is directly above the grill. Poirot inclined his head. And directly above the table, where Mr. Lang crawled to adjust the periscope. You saw him. You improvised. Lang lunged halfway from his chair. She threatened me. Said if I didn't help frame Hale, she'd expose the forgery. Rossi laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You little worm. You begged me to swap the bullet. You wanted him dead. Poirot raised a hand. Silence fell like a guillotine. No, you both wanted him dead, but for different reasons. Lang to save his reputation, Rossi to silence a blackmailer, but the third player wanted more. He produced a folded telegram from his pocket, the paper crisp, the ink still sharp. Sent to the signal box from Paris. Delay 6:25 to 6:45. Engine fault. The handwriting matches the yacht memo. Miss Croft, you forged Sir Reginald's signature daily. You sent the telegram. Miss Croft's composure shattered. He was going to ruin us all. The embezzled funds were to save the company. He discovered the shortfall. Poirot's voice was gentle. So you built the perfect crime. Lang's device, Rossi's bullet, your timing, but you made one mistake. He knelt beneath the table again, peeled away a final strip of tape. A tiny clockwork bird, its wings soldered to a spring, lay in his palm. This was to chirp at 6:46, confirming the sun's angle. You tested it last night. The bird's song woke the child in compartment 8. He told his nurse. The nurse told Monsieur Bouc. Miss Croft began to weep, soundless tears tracking her cheeks. Poirot stood. 3 killers, 1 crime. Lang the architect, Rossi the assassin, Croft the conductor. The sunrise was merely the baton. Outside, clouds gathered over the Alps, the golden light dimming to pewter. The complications had twisted into a knot only Poirot could untie. The revelation waited, patient as the mountains. Chapter 6. The Revelation. Poirot waited until the train lurched forward again, wheels singing over fresh snow, before he spoke. The dining car had been cleared of breakfast things. Only the evidence remained, laid in a neat arc on the white cloth like instruments before surgery. Sunlight, now slanted and pale through drifting cloud, slid across the brass screw, the torn glove, the cracked telescope, the clockwork bird. The suspects sat in a half-circle, ringed by the silent carriages of the Orient Express, the mountains outside rolling past like slow applause. Poirot stood at the head of the table, small, immaculate, his green eyes bright as absinthe. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice soft enough that every breath in the room was audible. "The crime is complete, the curtain falls. Yet before the actors take their bow, Hercule Poirot must explain the play." He lifted the music box first. Monsieur Lang conceived the mechanism. A child's toy, a bottle of frozen champagne, a wax seal calibrated to the minute the sun would strike the dome at 46 degrees north. Ingenious, harmless, he thought. A wax bullet to frighten Sir Reginald into silence over the forged Rembrandt. Lang placed the device in the ventilation shaft at 6:28, crawling beneath the tablecloth while Madame Rossi distracted the company with a toast. Lang's head dropped into his hands. Poirot continued, but Madame Rossi saw the crawl. She recognized opportunity. Sir Reginald held letters proving her affair with the Duke of San Remo, letters that would end her career. During the toast, she swapped Lang's wax pellet for a real 22, using her opera glove to muffle the music box's chime and to hide her fingerprints. She believed Lang would take the blame. Poirot set the glove beside the box, yet the timing was too perfect. The train's unscheduled stop, the exact angle of sunrise, these required knowledge no passenger could possess by chance. He placed the forged telegram on the cloth. Miss Croft sent this from Paris 3 weeks ago, imitating Sir Reginald's hand. She had embezzled £200,000 to cover losses from a failed shipping venture. Discovery meant prison. She scheduled the delay, calculated the light, and planted the clockwork bird to confirm the mechanism's arming. She believed the murder would be pinned on Lang or Rossi, leaving her untouched. He arranged the mirrors, the telescope, the brass screw in a precise line. 3 minds, 1 crime. Lang built the stage, Rossi loaded the gun, Croft set the clock. Each thought the other's expendable. Poirot's gaze moved to Lady Beatrice. "And you, madame, knew everything. Your husband beat you. He planned divorce. You booked the Alpine route to give Croft the sunrise she needed. You dampened your gloves with champagne to wash away traces of wax you handled when you tested the seal. You said nothing because silence bought your freedom. Lady Beatrice's pearls snapped. Beads scattered like hail across the table. "He broke my wrist in Cairo," she whispered. "I wanted him gone, not dead." Poirot inclined his head. "Intent is not action. You are accessory, not assassin." Captain Hale stirred. "And my revolver in Rossi's hatbox?" Poirot smiled. "Planted by Croft to implicate you. Your debt made you suspect. The caliber was wrong, but panic blinds." He turned to the company. The shot was fired from below. The ice bullet rose, melted, the lead fell. The observation door locked from habit, Sir Reginald's reflex after entering. The key on the hook was never needed. The crime was impossible only until one understood the sunlight was the trigger, the table the barrel, the ventilation shaft the chimney. He reconstructed the final seconds in slow, deliberate gestures. At 6:45 the sun melted the wax. The music box turned, the catapult snapped, the ice bullet shot upward through the shaft, struck the dome, shattered. The lead core continued downward, piercing Sir Reginald's heart at 6:47. He locked the door, collapsed, died. The ice became water, dripped onto the tablecloth, evaporated. No gun, no footprints, no exit. Lang looked up, eyes red. "I only wanted to scare him." Rossi laughed, bitter. "You gave me the weapon." Croft stared at the clockwork bird as though it might sing again. The company would have folded. Poirot's voice was almost tender. 3 crimes in one. Greed, vengeance, terror. The sunrise revealed all. Monsieur Bouc entered with 2 Italian policemen. The train had reached Venice. Gondolas rocked below the embankment like black swans. Lang, Rossi, Croft were led away in silence. Lady Beatrice remained seated, pearls rolling into the blood-stained crease of the cloth. Poirot placed a hand on her shoulder. "Justice, madame, is not always cruel. You will testify. You will be free." He turned to the window. The sun, now low, painted the lagoon rose and gold. "The perfect crime," he murmured, "is like the sunrise. Beautiful, precise, impossible to hide when the light comes." The Orient Express steamed on, carrying its secrets toward the sea. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The train hissed into Venezia Santa Lucia as the sun slipped behind the Campanile of San Marco, turning the Grand Canal into a ribbon of molten copper. Steam billowed along the platform, swallowing the last of the daylight, and for a moment the Orient Express seemed to exhale all its tension in a single, weary sigh. Poirot stood at the dining car door, hat in hand, watching the Italian policeman escort Felix Lang, Valentina Rossi, and Evelyn Croft down the steps. Lang's wrists were cuffed, his loud tie askew. He kept his eyes on the ground as though the marble tiles might open and swallow him. Rossi walked with the erect spine of a diva, taking a final bow, violet silk fluttering like a mourning flag. But her lips trembled when a photographer's flash caught her face. Croft was last, spectacles fogged, the clockwork bird confiscated and bagged as evidence. She paused on the bottom step, looked back once at the blood-speckled dome, and then allowed herself to be led away without a word. The doors of a black Fiat closed behind them with the finality of a coffin lid. Lady Beatrice remained at the table, pearls gathered into a small silk pouch, her gloved hands folded as though in prayer. Captain Hale stood beside her, one palm resting lightly on her shoulder, an unspoken promise, perhaps, or simple human kindness. Monsieur Bouc hovered nearby, twisting his conductor's cap until the braid frayed. Poirot descended the steps slowly, the gravel crunching beneath his patent shoes. A cool lagoon breeze lifted the ends of his scarf. He paused beside Beatrice. "Madame, the police will require your statement. You will tell them everything. Your husband's cruelty, the forged telegram, the gloves. But you will not be charged. Silence is no longer your cage." She nodded, tears bright but unshed. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. I thought freedom would taste sweeter." He patted her hand. "It will in time. Like good cognac, it must breathe." Hale cleared his throat. "My debt dies with him, I suppose." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Sir Reginald's will was read in Paris yesterday. He left you £1 and a Bible. The rest, after debts, goes to a home for shell-shocked veterans. Your IOUs were burned this morning by his solicitor." Hale's scarred cheek twitched. He managed a crooked smile. The old devil had a sense of humour after all. He offered Beatrice his arm. "May I escort you to the hotel, Lady Ashford? Venice is kinder at twilight." She took it without hesitation, and together they walked the length of the platform, two silhouettes shrinking against the vast facade of the station. Poirot turned to Bouc. "The observation car. Clean it thoroughly. The Compagnie Internationale des Wagons-Lits must not carry ghosts into Turkey." Bouc nodded vigorously. "Already arranged, monsieur. New glass, new carpet. By tomorrow it will be as though nothing happened." Poirot's moustache curled. "Something always happens, mon ami. That is the charm of the world." He glanced at the evidence bags being loaded into a police launch. "The music box, the mirrors, the bird, send them to Brussels. I have a small museum of impossible crimes." Bouc saluted with his cap and hurried off. A porter approached with Poirot's valise, monogrammed in gold. "Your gondola is waiting, signore." Poirot tipped the man, then paused on the edge of the canal. The water lapped gently at the mossy steps. A gondolier in a striped jersey poled past, humming "O Sole Mio" under his breath. Poirot stepped aboard, settled onto the cushioned seat, and allowed the boat to glide beneath the station bridge. The city unfolded around him. Palazzi, the colour of old, pearls, bridges, arching like cats, the scent of salt and coffee and distant wood smoke. He lit a small cigar, watched the smoke curl upward, and reviewed the case one final time in the quiet of his mind. Lang would serve 7 years for conspiracy and forgery, Rossi 15 for murder, Croft 10 for embezzlement and accessory. Lady Beatrice would testify, then disappear, perhaps to the Greek islands, perhaps to a quiet villa in Provence. Hale would sell his medals, buy a small boat, and fish the Adriatic until the war in his head grew quiet. The forged Rembrandt would be destroyed, the embezzled funds recovered from a Zurich account, the shipping line sold to a Norwegian consortium. Order restored, balance regained. Yet Poirot felt the familiar melancholy that follows every solution, the sense that justice, like sunrise, is beautiful but brief, and darkness always waits beyond the horizon. The gondola turned into a narrow Rio, the buildings closing overhead until only a strip of violet sky remained. Poirot tapped ash into the water. "The perfect crime," he murmured to the ripples, "is the one that teaches us imperfection." The gondolier, misunderstanding, began to sing louder. Poirot smiled, closed his eyes, and let the city carry him forward into evening. Somewhere behind him, the Orient Express sounded its whistle, long, mournful, final, and steamed east without him, bound for Istanbul and new dawns. Justice had been served, warm as fresh bread, and the world, for one brief Venetian twilight, felt almost whole. Chapter 8. Echoes in the Lagoon. The gondola slipped from the narrow Rio into the open basin of the Giudecca. the water widening into a sheet of hammered pewter, beneath a sky the colour of tarnished silver. Poirot sat forward on the velvet cushion, cigar extinguished, the taste of smoke still clinging to his tongue like a memory he could not quite place. Venice at dusk was a city of reflections. Every palazzo, every bridge, every ripple doubled and distorted in the canal, until the boundary between real and mirrored dissolved. It was, he thought, the perfect setting for an aftermath. The case was closed, the criminals dispatched, the train departed, yet the little grey cells refused to rest. They whispered of loose threads, of harmonies unresolved, of a note struck in the dining car that still vibrated in the air. He instructed the gondolier to circle toward the Arsenale, away from the tourist routes, where the water smelled of tar and old rope rather than perfume and pastries. The boat nosed past a row of abandoned boathouses, their doors sagging, the wood silvered by salt. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A single lamp burned in the last shed, its glow trembling on the water like a heartbeat. He rapped the seat with his cane. "There, amico, put in!" The gondolier obeyed, poling silently to the landing. Poirot stepped ashore, shoes crunching on broken mussel shells, and approached the door. It stood ajar. Inside, a figure bent, over a workbench, backlit by the lamp, tools glinting like surgical instruments. "Buonasera, Signor Lang," Poirot said softly. Felix Lang straightened, a chisel in one hand, a small wooden box in the other. His wrists bore the red marks of recently removed cuffs. The Italian police had released him on condition he remain in Venice pending appeal. He looked thinner, the loud tie replaced by a workman's shirt, but the eyes were the same, darting, calculating. "Monsieur Poirot, I might have known the little Belgian would not let the lagoon swallow everything." He set the chisel down. "Come to gloat?" Poirot entered, closing the door behind him. The shed smelled of sawdust and linseed oil. On the bench lay the remnants of the music box, the ballerina lid, the brass screw, the copper wire, disassembled with the reverence of a watchmaker. "Non, monsieur, I come to understand. You build again, a new mechanism." Lang's laugh was bitter. "A music box for my niece. She is 6. She likes swans." He lifted a half-carved wooden bird, its neck arched in mid-song. "The old one is evidence. This one will play Frère Jacques, and nothing more lethal." Poirot circled the bench, gloved fingers trailing over the tools. "You told the police you acted alone in conception, yet the wax seal was calibrated to a precision of seconds. That requires mathematics beyond an art dealer's eye." He picked up a scrap of paper, calculations in a neat secretarial hand. "Miss Croft's figures, you kept them." Lang's shoulders sagged. "She sent them to me in prison. A peace offering, or a taunt." He opened a drawer, revealing a stack of letters, the top one in Croft's angular script. She claims the embezzlement was to save the company, not herself. That Sir Reginald's cruelty drove us all to madness. She wants absolution. Poirot read the letter in silence. Croft wrote of ledgers cooked to hide war losses, of Beatrice's bruises hidden beneath pearls, of Rossi's desperation. She ended with a single line. "The sunrise was never the killer." We were. Poirot folded the letter, returned it. "And Madame Rossi?" "In the women's prison at Giudecca. She sings arias to the walls. The guards say her voice cracks the plaster." Lang's mouth twisted. "She sent me a note too. You gave me the stage. I gave you the tragedy." "She blames me for the bullet." Poirot moved to the window. Across the water, the prison silhouette rose like a fortress, its windows barred but one lit from within. A faint thread of melody drifted over the lagoon, un bel di vedremo, pure, heartbreaking. She sings of hope, Poirot murmured. Yet hope is a dangerous note in a minor key. He turned back to Lang. And you, monsieur? What do you build now besides swans? Lang picked up the chisel again, but his hand trembled. Redemption, perhaps. Or another forgery. The line blurs. He gestured to a canvas in the corner, half covered by a cloth. Poirot lifted the fabric. It was the Rembrandt sketch. Sir Reginald's pride, Lang's downfall. Now slashed diagonally, the tear repaired with gold leaf in the kintsugi style. Broken and mended, Lang said. Like us. Poirot studied the golden scar. In Japan, they believe the flaw makes the object more beautiful. Here, the flaw makes the crime. He replaced the cloth. You will stay in Venice? Until the appeal. Then, who knows? The world is wide, and forgers are always in demand. Lang's smile was weary. Will you arrest me again, Monsieur Poirot? No. The law has its sentence. I have my curiosity. Poirot tipped his hat. Build your swans, monsieur, but remember, every mechanism has a weak spring. One day it will snap. He stepped back into the night. The gondolier waited, pole resting across his knees. Poirot boarded, and the boat glided away from the boathouse, the lamp's glow shrinking to a pinprick. Behind him, the chisel resumed its soft tapping, a lullaby for broken things. The lagoon carried the sound outward, mingling with Rossi's distant aria, until both dissolved into the hush of water against a stone. Poirot lit another cigar, watched the smoke rise and vanish. The case was closed, yet its echoes lingered in the city's veins. Gold leaf on a torn canvas, a swan taking shape under trembling hands, a voice behind bars singing of a day that would never come. Justice had been served, but Venice, like memory, refused to let the story end. The gondola turned toward the lights of San Marco, and Poirot allowed himself one final thought. The perfect crime is never perfect. It is merely the one that teaches us to listen for the next. Chapter 9. Whispers from the Water. The gondola cut a silent path beneath the Ponte dei Sospiri, the Bridge of Sighs, where condemned prisoners once glimpsed their last sliver of sky. Poirot sat with his gloved hands folded over the head of his cane, the city's lanterns flickering across the water like wary fireflies. The air had cooled. A faint mist rose from the canal, carrying the scent of algae and secrets. He had dismissed the gondolier at the Piazzetta with a generous tip and a murmured instruction to wait near the clock tower. Now he walked alone, shoes tapping a measured rhythm on the worn Istrian stone, past shuttered shops and the occasional late stroller, who nodded at the immaculate little man with the unmistakable moustache. Venice, after midnight, was a city of whispers, and tonight the whispers were for him. He turned into a narrow calle that smelled of damp plaster and cat, following the sound of water lapping against steps. At the end, a small campo opened to the lagoon, its edge lit by a single iron lantern. A woman stood there, half in shadow, a dark cloak drawn tight against the chill. Lady Beatrice Ashford, no longer lady, merely Beatrice now, turned as his footsteps approached. Her face was pale, the pearls gone, replaced by a simple silver brooch shaped like a swallow. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice low, "I thought you would come." He stopped an arm's length away, hat in hand. "You left the hotel. The police will worry. They think I am asleep. A sleeping draught in the water carafe. Harmless, but convincing." She managed a faint smile. "I needed air, and answers." Poirot studied her. The bruises had faded, but the wariness remained in the set of her shoulders. "You have questions, madame?" She gestured to a stone bench beside the water. They sat. The lagoon stretched black and endless before them, broken only by the running lights of a distant vaporetto. "Captain Hale proposed tonight," she said, "on the station platform as the train left. He said the war took everything from him but honour, and he wished to give what little remained to me." Her fingers twisted the cloak's edge. "I have not answered." Poirot nodded. "A man who has faced death learns to recognize life when it offers itself. But you hesitate. I hesitate because I do not know who I am without Reginald's shadow." She looked at him, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You saw the bruises. You heard the threats. Yet I booked the tickets. I knew the sunrise would be the moment. Did that make me the architect?" Poirot's voice was gentle. "You made the cage, madame. You did not forge the key. There is a difference." She drew a folded paper from her pocket, thick, cream-coloured, the Ashford crest embossed in gold. "His will. The solicitor delivered it this evening. After the veteran's home, after the debts, there is a codicil. To me, the villa in Capri, the yacht Sunrise, and a trust fund managed by Hale. He wrote it the day before he died." Her laugh was soft, incredulous. "He knew I would be free only in his absence. He gave me the means to leave him posthumously." Poirot took the document, scanned it by lantern light. The handwriting was Reginald's, bold, impatient, the date 11th October, 1926. "He suspected the plot," Poirot murmured, "or feared it. A man who beats his wife learns to read danger in silence." Beatrice leaned closer. "There is more." She produced a second sheet, thinner, the ink smudged as though written in haste. "Found inside the music box when the police returned my luggage. Reginald's hand again." Poirot unfolded it carefully. A single sentence. "If the sun rises on my blood, trust the Belgian. He will see the truth." Below, a postscript. "Forgive them, B. Hate is a heavier chain than marriage." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the slap of water against stone. Poirot refolded the note, returned it. "He understood the mechanism better than we knew. Perhaps he tested the wax seal himself. Perhaps he stood beneath the dome to meet his fate." Beatrice's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then I am guilty of nothing but survival." "Survival is not guilt, madame. It is the first act of courage." Poirot stood, offered his arm. "Come, the mist thickens. Captain Hale waits, and Venice is kinder to lovers than to ghosts." She took his arm. They walked back through the Calais, the lantern's glow shrinking behind them. At the edge of the piazza, Hale stood beneath the clock tower, collar turned up, a silhouette carved from worry. When he saw them, relief broke across his face like dawn. Beatrice released Poirot's arm, crossed the stones, and placed her hand in Hale's. No words, only the quiet certainty of two people choosing the same fragile future. Poirot watched them disappear toward the hotel, then turned toward the Vaporetto stop. A night boat was mooring, its deck empty save for a lone figure in a dark coat. As Poirot boarded, the figure stepped into the light, Monsieur Bouc, cap in hand, eyes red-rimmed. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, voice hoarse, "I could not sleep. The company, they have suspended me. Pending investigation. The delay, the telegram. They say I should have verified." Poirot placed a hand on his shoulder. "You verified the sunrise, mon ami. That was enough." He guided Bouc to a bench. "Drink this." From his pocket he produced a small silver flask, cognac fine and old. Bouc drank, coughed, drank again. "The Sunrise Yacht," Bouc said. "Lady Ashford has renamed it Étoile du Matin. She sails for Capri tomorrow with Hale." He managed a watery smile. "They asked me to be captain. A second chance?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The stars of morning are forgiving. Accept." The Vaporetto cast off, chugging toward the Lido. Poirot stood at the rail, the city receding into mist and memory. Behind him, Venice kept its secrets. The slashed Rembrandt mended with gold, the swan taking shape in a boathouse, the aria echoing from a prison wall, the note from a dead man absolving the living. Justice had been served, but mercy had slipped in through the cracks, quiet as moonlight on water. At the Lido, Poirot disembarked, the sand cool beneath his shoes. Dawn was still hours away, but he could feel it gathering beyond the horizon, patient, inevitable. He lit a final cigar, watched the smoke rise and vanish into the stars. The perfect crime, he said to the night, is the one that ends in forgiveness. The rest is merely noise. Chapter 10. The Dawn Ledger. Poirot woke before the first light. The hotel room on the Lido still cloaked in the bruised violet of pre-dawn. He lay motionless beneath the linen sheets, listening to the Adriatic breathe against the seawall, each wave a slow inhale, each retreat a sigh. The little grey cells, usually so disciplined, had spent the night in quiet rebellion, replaying fragments of the case like a gramophone needle stuck in a groove, the brass screw rolling across the teak floor, the gold leaf foil curling in the galley sink, the clockwork bird's single aborted chirp. He rose, dressed with his customary precision, grey suit, white waistcoat, the tie pinned with a pearl the exact shade of the lagoon at noon, and descended to the empty breakfast terrace. A single table had been set for him, the waiter invisible but attentive. Coffee steamed in a silver pot. A plate of cornetti waited beneath a linen dome. Poirot ignored them. He opened his green leather notebook to a fresh page and wrote, in his small, exact hand, the Dawn Ledger. First entry, the mechanism. Lang's ingenuity had been childlike, almost playful. The ice bullet, a conjurer's trick, the music box a lullaby turned lethal. Yet the calibration, sunrise at 46.7 degrees, 6:45 a.m., 12 October, required nautical tables, a theodolite, and 3 weeks of correspondence between Paris and the signal box. Croft's fingerprints were on every calculation, literal and figurative. Poirot drew a small diagram. The ventilation shaft as a gun barrel, the dome as a lens, the tablecloth as a magician's cloth. Beneath it he wrote, "The crime was built in daylight, hidden in darkness." Poirot paused, pen hovering. Hale's motive had been the red herring, the revolver, the false clue. He crossed out the entry, rewrote it. Hale, redemption. The war took his future, the sunrise gave it back. Third entry, the telegram. Sent 4:17 a.m. from the Central Post Office in Paris, handwritten in Croft's imitation of Reginald's scrawl. The clerk remembered a woman in a grey coat, veil lifted just enough to show spectacles. Poirot underlined the time. 4:17. The Orient Express had departed Paris at 11:45 p.m. the previous night. Croft had sent the message before boarding, using a courier. The delay was never chance, it was choreography. Fourth entry, the note. Reginald's final message, tucked inside the music box. Trust the Belgian. Poirot copied it verbatim, then added, he knew. He stood beneath the dome to meet the bullet, not to smoke a cigar. A suicide staged as murder, to free Beatrice and punish the conspirators. He stared at the words until they blurred. Had Reginald orchestrated his own death? The angle was perfect, the timing exact. Yet the wax seal had been swapped for lead. Reginald could not have predicted Rossi's improvisation. Poirot drew a line through the sentence, rewrote, he suspected, he accepted, he did not intend the lead. He turned the page. Fifth entry, the aftermath. Lang in the boathouse, carving swans from olive wood. the slashed Rembrandt mended with gold, Rossi in prison, her voice cracking plaster, singing Madama Butterfly to an audience of rats, Croft in a cell with a ledger, recalculating her life in columns of years. Beatrice and Hale, aboard the renamed Étoile du Matin, bound for Capri, the codicil their passport to a future unshadowed by pearls. Bouc at the helm, his suspension lifted, the company's apology, a first-class cabin, and a bottle of 1915 Dom Perignon. Poirot smiled faintly. The ledger balanced. He closed the notebook, slipped it into his breast pocket, and finally lifted the coffee. It was perfect, hot, bitter, alive. Outside, the horizon began to pale, the first thread of rose-stitching sky to sea. Poirot stood at the terrace rail, watching the light gather. At 6:12 a.m., the sun breached the water, a coin of fire flung from an invisible hand. The lagoon blazed, every ripple a mirror, every mirror a memory. He raised the cup in silent salute. "À la santé," he murmured, "of those who build mechanisms and those who break them, of those who forgive and those who are forgiven." He folded the paper, tucked it beside the ledger. The sun climbed higher, gilding the terrace, the sea, the distant spires of Venice. Poirot finished the coffee, set the cup down with a soft click, and turned toward the vaporetto that would carry him back to the city, to the train, to the next impossible dawn. The ledger was closed, but the story always inevitably continued.